What's going on, guys? So today we're talking about the Canon R5C and more specifically the menu system, and we're just going to go over the really bare bone basics. So that way, if you're used to the Canon R5 video menu system, this menu system is a whole lot different, and I just figured I'd make a little basic video so that way you know your way around this menu system. So the first thing that you're greeted with is the iris mode, and what that basically means is your f-stop, your aperture. So if you want to shoot at f16 or f1.2. Now I personally have mine set to manual mode because I want to be able to control that. Now there is an automatic mode. The Canon R5, from my understanding, didn't have this. But what the automatic will do for you is basically if it's really sunny out, then it's going to bump up the f-stop, the aperture, at like f22 or f16. And in the darker shaded areas, it's going to go all the way down to like, 1.2 or 2.8, whatever the case may be. So the next basic thing that you're going to want to know how to do on this camera is the autofocus. How is the autofocus on this camera? Well, I'll tell you right away that it's probably not as good as the R5. It's just really different. Now I have my continuous AF autofocus set to enabled. And in AF frame, you'll see large, small, and whole frame. I have mine set to large because the small is just obviously what it says is just a small portion of the screen, and I want it to be a little bit bigger. Now, in order to change this AF position, you're gonna need to go in there and choose selectable, not center frame. Because obviously if you choose center frame, it's gonna do what it says. It's gonna put it right in the center frame there, and you're not gonna be able to touch the screen to choose where you want it to focus. Now I personally have my AF speed and response set to about +1 on my camera. You can set it how you like for the response time of that. Face AF, I have it set to priority, so that way if I have my other settings to like somewhere I want it to be, it will track the faces that are in the frame first before it chooses where I want it to go. And then for me, I have eye detection on because I just think that that's most suitable for what I shoot it for. So the Canon R5C doesn't have in-body stabilization, so I don't really care about that because I use a gimbal, so if I want really stable shots, I'll just use a gimbal. But you do have digital IS. The only problem is if you turn that on, it crops it in a little bit. That's not really a big deal, not really a game changer for me, but just be aware of that. So the next thing that we can see here that you're gonna need to know for the basic camera settings. Now I'm just setting you up so that way you can get out and shoot as quickly as possible. We're not going right deep dive into it, but initialize media basically means like formatting the SD card, whether you want to format the CF Express card or format the SD card. That's what that initialize media means. Now, if you're gonna want to dual card record, so like from one card to another card, this is where you're gonna use that. And then in number 3, we can see second card record function. Now what that basically means is if you wanna record like dual card recording, now it doesn't work for 4K at 120 frames per second. If you want to dual card record, you got to shoot at 4K 60, and then you can shoot to the SD card and the CF Express because the SD card isn't fast enough to shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. So if you want to dual card record, that's where you do that. Now this option here, we can see that we can control the monitor channels, which basically means your microphone. So when you plug in your microphone on the side of the camera, that way you can watch your levels from the first channel and the second channel. Now, when it comes to the Canon R5C, for the video sides of things, the screen is actually very, very dark. And in direct sunlight, it pretty much, for me anyway, it'd be pretty much impossible to see the screen. So you're gonna need probably like a monitor to go on top of this camera. Maybe, if you have good eyes, you might be better than me for that. But for me, it's really, really dark. So we got the LCD brightness. You're gonna wanna play around with that and set that up higher or lower, depending on how you can see. So moving on to one of my favorite parts about the Canon R5C is the customizable buttons that we have on here. Now I'm used to touching the top button for record, and I'm not used to touching this button here, the shut, like to take pictures. I'm not used to doing that for my record. So you can actually go in there and set this for whatever you want, and that's pretty awesome. Okay, moving on to the system setup, or if you want to call it the wrench setup, page 8. We have that fan mode for this camera, and that's probably a good reason why everyone is buying this camera, because it doesn't overheat. So if you're shooting for a client like what I do for professionally, I can't have my camera overheat on me. So you have two options. You can either go automatic or always on, or the fan record speed, you can choose low, medium, or high. Now, if you're shooting on a really hot day in direct sunlight, you might want to turn that to always on and put it at a low setting so that way it's always turned on. And when you're all done and you go out and you greet it with your video, you can see in the bottom left corner there, if you touch that button, and if you look on the top left-hand corner, you can see that you can quickly access your full frame, your normal recording, or whether or not you want to do slow motion, you can go in there and play around with that. Or you can also choose your double slot recording from there as well. So that way you don't have to go right into the menu system. It's all right there really quickly. You can also scroll over and choose 10-bit if you want, or your resolution, whether or not you want to shoot in 4K, 8K. You also have your frame rate right there where you can choose 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second. And then you also have your Rec 709 standard, or your C-Log, you can go in there and choose that as well. Okay guys, so that's been your very basic guide on how to just get this up and running right away and just get shooting right away as quickly as possible. You're gonna need to know those menu options. Now, if you want, I can dive really deep into the camera and explain a whole lot more about the menu system. If you did enjoy this video, help me out, give it a thumbs up. It will let me know that you want a part 2 for this, and we can dive very, very deep into it. If you haven't heard, I'm giving away a DJI Air 2S for free, no strings attached. All you need to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel, like that video that I have up here in the corner, and then also go comment on that video. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been your no nonsense, straight to the point. Take care. I'll see you in the next video.